We move now to item 9.4 on page 94 of the Director's report, dealing with the gateway proposal for the Rose Valley Road development. Page 94. Are there any questions to the Director? Councillor Honey?
Yes, I'd just like to ask the Director that whilst this is just a gateway proposal or change, any issues dealing with pollution and abattoir buffer zones and things like that would actually be dealt with in the development application process?
Through you, Mr Mayor, they most certainly would be dealt with during a development application process, but the next stage, if it was to progress and receive gateway approval, that gateway approval would normally mean consultation with relevant state government agencies. So if it triggered, say, an environmental planning licence or an environmental pollution licence, it would obviously necessitate EPA consultation. It will necessitate consultation with primary industries and any other relevant agencies through the gateway process.
Councillor Siege?
Mr Director, if we were to refuse this planning proposal, as I think we should, are there any further avenues for the proponent to go forward?
Through Mr Mayor, there's a statutory process where they could seek a review of planning proposals through the Department of Planning directly.
Thank you.
Councillor Way.
To the Director, I'm just wondering, we're told that it doesn't fit with the LEP, so how does that have a bearing on this?
Mr Director.
Through you, Mr Mayor, that's basically why we have this report here, and it is a planning proposal. It is a livestock processing facility. This is a rural zone, and some may say it's an anomaly with our planning instrument, although it may be more to the definitions. But under previous land uses and previous LEPs, an abattoir would be differently defined. But with the new template, it is now a livestock processing facility, which includes a number of types of facilities. It also is a subset of a rural industry. Now, in the rural zone, we have specifically listed permitted uses. We have specifically listed permitted without consent uses. So we have permitted with consent, permitted without consent. They are specifically listed. All other land uses are not specifically listed and become prohibited. So they're nominate uses. They're not specifically named. It just collects all the other land uses that aren't specifically allowed. So I think there, as I say, some would recognise that as an anomaly, or it's an issue associated with current definitions in the template.
Mr.
Yes,
Mayor, I would like to move that the recommendation as printed be moved.
I'll come back to you. I think I've got a question.
Just
here
got a question.
first. Yes.
Thanks, Mayor. To the Director, if we were to approve this, what sort of condition could we put that only the proponent's cattle be able to be killed on this site? In other words, no other cattle can come in.
Through Mr Mayor, look, I think through the process, it is a gateway process to recognise under Schedule 1, so it's not as if it's a rezoning and we're simply putting a land use in. So we can be quite specific under Schedule 1 to allow a land use, and in this case it could be a livestock processing facility to process, in this case, Wagyu beef reared on the same property, and you could put the property description in. So that could certainly occur because of this process in its Schedule 1 situation where you can be more definitive.
Can I move that now?
Well, no, I've got Councillor Honey. I've indicated I'll give him first credit.
I just want to ask a question too.
Just a second, Councillor Way. We'll clear this. Councillor Way, turn your light off, if you would, thanks. Sorry, you have a second.
I'm asking the Director, can I move that now? Because Can I move that now, that be one of the conditions if it gets approved?
Through Mr Mayor, we can move, the resolution could be along the lines that it would be endorsed to go to the gateway process,
Yes.
specifying that the additional use will be for a livestock processing facility for Wagyu beef up to the certain number read on
that property.
that property,
On,
yes.
on that property is that the word... Okay.
Just an,
Yes, another question, Councillor Wade.
another question to the director. How do we know that this won't lead to more properties?
Yeah, is
wanting
it
to do
site
it?
specific, I guess, is what he's asking.
Yeah, through Mr Mayor, as I mentioned, this is a different process to a rezoning. It refers to this property only, and it is this particular use which can be quite well defined. Other properties, would be property owners could make application, and again they would have to be assessed on their merits. This particular application has put forward quite a specific set of circumstances related to this property. It's a specialist type rearing situation, and that's been the focus on putting this planning proposal forward.
So it wouldn't be setting a precedent for others. That
Yes,
would,
Councillor.
if we agree to that and it goes through, it wouldn't be setting a precedent for other properties.
Through Mr Mayor, no, it wouldn't set a precedent and anyone else could apply, but each one would need to be assessed on their merits.
Thank you. Councillor Seed, you have a question?
Yes, I have concerns about halal inhumane slaughtering of animals. Is there some sort of protection we can impose to ensure that that sort of thing doesn't happen?
I think,
If this were to be
could I ask the Director to just clarify that this is not dealing with a development application, it's the preliminary process, gateway proposal.
Yeah, but like Councillor
That
Steele
would
said,
be-
for the gateway, can we put on conditions, if we were to allow this to go through, put conditions on for the Department of Planning to take into consideration? A report from the staff.
Through Mr Mayor, we could certainly place conditions that restrict the land use, i.e. to where the livestock is sourced from, perhaps the type of livestock, as in this is a specialist breed. So we could certainly specify that, which is directly associated with the land use. If an abattoir was to be approved on that site, it certainly comes under primary industries control, which is a licensing and an inspection regime. So that would be there to limit as to different methodologies of how a beast may be put down. No, that wouldn't be within the ambit of a Schedule 1 situation.
I don't believe they'd be allowed, in the event of it occurring, they'd be allowed to act inhumanely. That would be against the law. Councillor McClure, you have a question? Sorry, sorry, Councillor Wright, you have a question? And then Councillor McClure.
Yes, question to the Director. Should this progress beyond the gateway proposal, do we have any opportunity at a further date, like in the DA application, to impose further controls that we may see fit?
Through Mr Mayor, if the proposal went to a development application stage, yes, Council certainly has the opportunity to apply far more specific requirements than would be permitted under Schedule 1 under the planning proposal regime.
Councillor McClure.
If I could, through you, Mr Mayor, to the Director, have you had any indication from the proponent whether he is looking at slaughtering other people's beef or chicken or anything else, or is it just solely for his own use?
Through Mr Mayor, it was a very preliminary discussion. That issue was raised. The proponent certainly put forward that it was to be beasts from their own property only, and that had to do with the biosecurity issues and other issues associated with the speciality of their particular product.
Thank you. Councillor Honey, you have the floor for a motion.
Yes, I would move that we adopt this
The
recommendation.
recommendation as in the
as
report.
printed.
Thank you. You move that way. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Rowley, thank you. Councillor Honey, you wish to speak to it?
Yes, I will speak on this. I have several documents in my drawer here One is the Kiama Economic Development Strategy. One is the Illawarra Plan that's just been released. There is the Illawarra Food Sustainability document, which Council endorsed last year. There are so many documents that specify that if we need to, if we wish to retain the agricultural land in our municipality, we have to be able to provide some sort of diversification. We have to provide methods for people to continue agriculture in this area. The large-scale farming system, there are probably about a dozen large-scale farms still operating viably in the municipality. There are a lot of small farms that are on the brink. If we can encourage this sort of development, I'm not specifying an abattoir on each farm. What I am specifying is that we encourage people to look beyond just growing cattle or just having some way of value adding. I think that we have to encourage rather than try and put obstacles in the way all the time of people who are trying to have a go. If we want to protect the green hills, the rolling valleys and that, we have to protect the people that are looking after those hills, and they're the farmers. And that's why this is only a gateway proposal. Once the DA comes in, there will obviously be reports from the EPA and other bodies about whether or not this can go ahead. But let's not discourage people from having a go.
Thank you. Councillor Rowley.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I seconded this partly to encourage a debate on the topic, but also to say that there needs to be an understanding that this is a gateway proposal, and that gateway proposal is to enact a change to our LEP. To do that, there has to be significant public community consultation. There are many opportunities during this process for people to engage with that process, and that engagement has to be recorded and noted. When and if it comes back as approved through the gateway process, every single dwelling or use of that land in a construction sense has to be approved by this council one way or another. And it's kind of like if we put a gateway proposal through and say, well, we want a housing development to go in area A, we're not saying what type of houses. We're not saying whether the electricity has wires or whether the sewerage is connected in this way or that way, or the houses should have double fronted, or the houses should contain people of this nature or that nature. That comes at a later stage. It's that development. It's that planning proposal that we're debating, and I think that it's fair enough that goes through. I may think differently when I see the DA for the proposal for the abattoir. That the staff may think differently. We all may have different ideas, but it's not to approve an abattoir. It's to approve a process where an abattoir can be applied for on that land.
Thank you. Speaker against, Councillor Sloan.
Yes, Mr Mayor, I am speaking against this. I mean, what we're doing tonight, it is gateway, but it's also a tacit endorsement that we would support it. We're supporting it to go off to further planning and further evaluation. I think we might be leading the proponent up the garden path, and I honestly, none of us were provided with, but I have reviewed all the effluent management sites, which I'll speak to in a moment. But is anyone here aware that on top of the hill, we're actually talking about a 40 by 20 metre ground floor and then a revolving restaurant on the top of the hill? I don't know whether the councillors are even aware of that aspect of it. But I'll try not to get sidetracked on that. That's going to be a huge scar on the side of the hill. I mean, it might be a great thing. But look, I'm going to focus, though, on effluent. I have taken the time, it's my professional area of expertise to look at effluent management, and I have worked for a number of abattoirs to prepare management plans for them. This one has got a couple of really critical errors. I should say, I think councillors probably envisage this as a very small affair. Their own reports say that their irrigation area to dispose of the effluent, which is going to be right down near the flood area at the bottom of the hill, is 2,200 square metres. That's the effluent irrigation area. Unfortunately, they were way out on two counts. The rainfall in that area is almost 1,000 millimetres higher than what they've used, and the best practice water management guidelines, so for the best run abattoir, has more than 3 times as much effluent being generated as they have used in this document. So I'm really concerned about the levels of effluent that are going to be generated and how they're going to be disposed of. Anyone who lives in the Rose Valley or the Willow, I've lived in Willow Vale for a while, knows that deep clay that is there, just under the surface, water cannot percolate through it. So in wet periods, it just runs off. This proponent is talking about only a couple of days' worth of storage and irrigating again on that 2,200 square metres after only 1 day after the rain. Well, anyone who knows that soil, and it does acknowledge this in the report, that's why they can only apply a very minute amount of water, would understand that it's going to be saturated and running off into the Werry Creek Lagoon. Now, why does the Werry Creek Lagoon matter? We have some good water quality monitoring and some research done on Werry Creek. The lagoon closes over most of the time. Can I just read this little point? So the studies that have been done on Werry Lagoon indicate that nutrient concentrations are primary cause of overloading of that lagoon. And this is the important point on the other page. I'm sorry, Mr Mayor. But there was a study done for Kiama Council in 2002 which analysed the 3 major estuaries. It looked at Werry and Minamurra and the Crooked River. It found that the Werry Lagoon had much higher nutrient loads than the other 2, and it was not safe to swim in a lot of the time because it was closed. It's this fact that it's closed, the nutrients build up in there. And so it actually said, bottom line was, it was shown that nutrient concentrations in the Minamurra River were good compared to other South Coast estuaries. However, nutrient concentrations in both Werry and Crooked River were much higher than national guidelines during wet weather and in dry weather. And I'm going through all this detail because they are going to need an EPA licence. The EPA licence is going to be extremely complex, have a lot of requirements on them that I just don't think they're ever going to meet. So that's a technical thing, but the bigger picture is the LEP. Do we really want to approve an abattoir? It's the only thing that is prohibited in the LEP in this area, in this valley, which is apparently more sensitive than the other valleys, when it is really setting a precedent for other places. What's to stop this exact application happening in various 5 spots, 10 spots in Jamboree? Nothing. Abattoirs are a specialist business, and that's why abattoirs are usually big affairs with proper wastewater management and more than a kilometre away from the nearest residence, because odour is always a problem, Mr Mayor. The last thing we need is an abattoir in Rose Valley threatening, really, the vista, causing odour and water quality problems in already stressed Werry Lagoon. I don't think it's got a chance of getting past the state agencies, and I also would hate to see us overriding the only prohibited use in this area and seeing it roll out potentially in other areas. So I would be arguing that we amend that first point and just simply not endorse the planning proposal for additional permitted uses.
Well, that's the opposite to the motion. So
right.
if you'll move that, I presume, if the motion fails. Councillor, no other councillors to speak. Councillor Honey, you'd write a reply.
Look, I understand the problems that an abattoir causes, and those problems will be addressed by the appropriate bodies during the development application process. Why I am particularly keen to see this go is that it's an indication to people that this council is not going to stop anything that doesn't tick all the boxes every time. I would like to see that this council, in fact, encourages diversification. It encourages a variety of activities in the rural areas, so that, in fact, we can keep the rural areas as they are.
Thank you. That ends the debate. The motion before you is the recommendation on pages 94 and the top of page 95. It's a planning matter. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Those against? I'll declare it carried.